So we're going to start with our summary report on the left-hand side, and the first one that I'm going to go through is your summary report. So the summary report is one of those ones that gets used probably every month by councils. It's a great report because it's going to give you your actual against your budget. So you've got your annual budget that's displayed on your expenditure. Obviously, you've got your income as well. And then the actual with the variance given both as a value and as a percentage. Do remember that it is a budgeting report. Effectively, it's showing you that budget against actual. So net values only for both the actual and the budget should always just be that net value. It's not considered a true cost to the council, so it's going to be able to show you that information without it. Number of different filters that we have on the summary report. So going into the filter in the top right hand corner, now all of our reports have filters on them. Some have more than others. But if you've only used this report just as it's run, it might be something that you haven't investigated previously. So when we come into here at the top, we've got the ability to look at the different cost centres. So this is currently displaying all of them. And we can also order the reports in different ways. So mine is currently ordered by cost centre name. So you can see it's actually in alphabetical order. I've prefixed one of my cost codes with a 01 to get that to the top of the report artificially. And then it goes on in alphabetical, admin, allotments, etc. But I can actually choose to order it by cost centre ID. So that will be the way that I actually set the system up when I first joined Scribe. And if you've set them up in ID order, i.e. the first one that you created will be ID number 1, ID number 2, and we often recommend that you do this if you want things like income at the top of the report. If you filter that report or order it by cost centre ID and view it again, you can see the same information, but I've now got my income showing at the top of the report. So that can be quite useful. Going back to that filter option as well, you can group specific groups together. So it says the next one here is cost center group. So I can add a new group if you haven't done one before. I'm just going to edit the ones that I've got already to show you what these do. So adding the groups together gives you this ability to be able to view the summary report either for specific committees only, or you might be using the summary report for your precept allocation, in which case you don't want those reserves that you might have separated out as a cost code there. So it gives you this ability to group your cost centres together. So you can see I've got one here for my cemetery committee, and I've just chosen 2 cost centres there, my income and my lawns. And then similarly, that precept allocation, so that's the one that I'm excluding my reserves on. I've added all of my cost codes to that, excluding my one for earmarked reserves. So once you've got those, going back to that summary report and looking to the filter, I can then choose those groups that I've created. So if I wanted this precept allocation excluding my reserves, I can choose that one, and it's going to give me all of my cost centres that I've got listed here, but it's not going to include this earmarked reserves. So when I click on to view report, it's giving me all of those totals. So I've still got the individual cost centres and cost codes, but not with the earmarked reserves. So it's got that lovely summary at the bottom to tell me what my full budgeted income and budgeted expenditure is without those reserves, and can be quite nice to give that report to sort of specific committees as well. That's grouping your individual cost centres together. You can obviously do this report on from and to dates. So it is your budgeting report. So you want to know how much you've spent up until a certain period in time. So it's usually run from the beginning of the year, but you can choose any from and to dates that you want. Final one you've got here is a little tick box for showing the subtotal. So we can see that the report at the moment is grouped together by your cost centres. But if you take the tick out of that subtotal box, it's just going to list all of the cost codes without that grouping, so without those cost centres. By clicking onto view report now, I've got a nice 1-page report with all of my individual cost codes or budget lines. And again, those nice grouped summary totals at the bottom. So quite a nice one sometimes to be able to give out if you don't want them grouped together. So that's all just within the summary report. So lots of different options that you can do there rather than just running it. Always I'd ask you to log in through Google Chrome. Scribe has been optimized for all of the reports with Google. Provided you have logged in with Google Chrome, you'll have this Google taskbar that you get across the top of the report where you can download that report to your computer. You can also print it off to share it as well. Using the Actions button in the top right-hand corner, you've still got the ability to download it to PDF, to download it to Excel, and also to share that report directly. Sharing the report directly literally just gives you a PDF link for it. So having clicked on to share, I've now got this PDF link that I can literally pop straight into my email client, or you can even email it from here, which will just open up your Gmail or other Outlook that you've got for actually sending off those emails. So that's your summary report. When we've actually looked through at the summary report, we might come to a specific area and say, oh gosh, yes, I've overspent here on my website and IT costs. I'd like to look at some further detail of that. I'd like to have a breakdown, either because I want to see that area that I've overspent, or I just like to see what transactions are included in that grouping for those individual budget lines. So to view it in more detail than the summary report, we're going to come down to our detailed cost center report. So coming into the detailed cost center report, we get a nice report here that shows us all of our transactions at cost center and cost code level. It also gives us a description. So the description is quite nice because if we know that our cost code, i.e. our budget line, in my case here is staff salary, as I'm coming down for my descriptions, I can make sure that I don't have any coding errors. Does everything match the budget line that I've popped it in? We've just sort of come on to the end of that year-end thing now. This is certainly one of the reports we use in the year-end health checks that we provide to customers. So it's a nice one to go through here because you can see it. Just on another note as well, we always say that when you're voiding a transaction, if you pop that duplicate entry in, as well as setting the net value to 0, I always pop that word void in on my description. It's because I'm a little bit OCD, but it's equally helpful when you're coming through this report, going down that description list. You can obviously see very clearly that that was a duplicate error, a duplicate code, so it shouldn't have been there. Again, scrolling down, coming through for this, I can see I've got my electricity cost code here, and I've got some that say A4 paper. So equally, as I said, it's highlighted it, it's showing me that it's a coding error. So quite easy for me to go and change that. But equally, I'm being able to see that breakdown. I'm being able to see everything that I've popped into those individual cost codes to give me those totals that we'd seen on the summary report. So that's one example of using a detailed cost center, is looking for those coding issues and also being able to see that breakdown report. Heading to the filter option again, remember you can do lots of things with the reports, not just the standard view that it first produces. We can look at this report by a transaction type of, it defaults to payments. We can also look at it for receipts. And that can also be useful, certainly at year end, as well as payments and receipts. When we start looking down the description, I'm always looking for the word refund. So when I see refund on either income or receipts, I need to make sure that the net value has got a minus next to it, because it's showing me that I've actually popped it on the right side of the cash book. If I have received some allotment deposits that have come in, so I've received that as income, it's come in as a transaction that I've added to my receipts and is showing in my box 3. If I'm refunding that allotment key hire, then that's going out as negative income. It's not going out as a payment. So I need to make sure that I'm also adding that into my receipts transaction. And you can obviously see this quite easily when you're looking through and looking at that description and seeing the word refund. So quite useful for that too. If I change the filter from receipts to both, it's just going to update my description to show me that I've got payments and receipts. So I can see here underneath the description that I've now got whether it's a receipt or whether it's a payment. So I've got the two together on the one report, but I can see them all together, which is quite nice. Again, heading back into that filter, you've got the ability to look at code transfers. So if you have added any code transfers into your system, that's where you've moved money around. So it's not related to a specific transaction, but you've just said, I've allocated something to staff expenses and it should have been allocated to electricity, but I don't want to split the individual transaction, or it's already gone off to HMRC, so I can't actually update where it's been allocated. So rather than having to do those reversal and replacement corrections, you can just use a code transfer. If you had added a code transfer in, you can again include that on this report and it'll update it for you. So it then matches the summary report. I think I've got some down here on my staff expenses. So if I make that a little bit bigger, you can see it. Here we've got one where I've actually had a code transfer. So I've taken that £150 payment off of my staff expenses and it's been added to my stationery one. So we can see that, and we can see that with the net total here, how it's actually added those up and it's taken that £150 into consideration. So lots of different abilities that you can do with that detailed cost center. Some people also use this as a payments list. So it might be that you just choose to filter this purely for the month of June so that you can see all of the payments and receipts at cost code level that have gone out from the council for the specific month. So lots of things there to be able to see that breakdown of all of your transactions, and that's that detailed cost center report. So sticking with the summary reports, we've gone through the summary report and the detailed cost center. You've got the net position report here. So we see on the summary report your net position anyway. Some councils still do use this report, certainly if you've not got the reserves module switched on for those balances brought forward. We don't tend to use balances brought forward for anything other than reserves, but it is the only report in Scribe that will show you that balance brought forward if you're using it. So I haven't got any in there for my earmarked reserves, but obviously if you did have some values, that would show. We also, within the summary reports, have our committed spend report. Now, your committed spend report is looking to any purchase orders that you've got. So if you've generated a purchase order, if you've created that, but it hasn't actually been paid yet, it's still seen as a commitment to spend. So it's going to increase that to your total. So you've got your budget, you've got what you've actually spent to date, but as you've raised that purchase order, it's going to give you that overall total. So that's where you're expecting to come in on your budget, or where you are with your budget at the moment, because it's including that purchase order. Obviously, as you start to convert that purchase order into a payment, the actual will increase, the committed expenditure will go down, and the total will stay as it is. But it just gives you that flexibility to be able to see it. So that's the ones that I wanted to go through on summary reports. We're now going to move up to the budgeting module. So budgeting module can be quite useful if you want to see a breakdown of your summary report that we looked at the beginning. So when we looked at that, and certainly when we look at these reports, we're looking at budget, that's the annual budget against what we've actually spent today. But sometimes it's quite useful to see that broken down month on month. So we can run our monthly report. Monthly report gives you exactly the same information, so the same totals as what you're seeing with your summary report, but we've got it, as I said, broken down month on month. So I can see that I've got my staff salary for 35,000 here. I can see to the end that I've still got £17,000 that I've physically spent, but it's giving me that month on month. So I can see that month on month spend that's going there, which, as I said, can be really quite useful. Heading back to that filter option, remember lots of different options by clicking on to filter. We have got the ability on here to show a forecast. So we do completely separate training on forecast, but if it's something that's of interest to you, you can go ahead and book yourself onto that training or watch it on demand. If you are using forecasting, then you can select the date and time for which you want to use your forecasting against, and it will pop those values in for you. You've got tick boxes here. You can either include the budget line or you can take it out. So you can actually just tick into the box or not. And we've also got one here about showing the zero lines. So on here, we can see I've got a number of, this is payments. I've got a number of income cost codes there that don't have any payments related to them as well. So if I take the tick out of the box for showing the zero lines and run that report again, in this instance, it's now going to include my forecasting from the month that I've selected, but it's also made the report much smaller because it's taken out those zero lines. So any lines that I've got that don't have any budget or any payment against that budget allocated to it are not displayed, and we can just see the individual breakdown. So that's your monthly report. We've also got a budgeting report. So budgeting report is quite a nice one because it gives you a 3-year report. You get the previous year, if you've got one on Scribe, the current year that sits in the middle, and then obviously the next year, which you can see here as I'm using my 23-24. I've already got 24-25 set up, so we can see that it's listing that as 24-25. Depending on where you are, you can obviously go back a year in 2022 and run this. You can go forward a year in 24-25 and see 25-26 as well. The current year will give you that additional column for forecast, so you've got that option to put in there. But other than that, it gives you that nice 3-year representation of all of your cost codes, and you can see those dependencies from one against the other. So it's quite nice to be able to do that sort of 3-year forecasting that we might be familiar with. Then at the bottom, we've got budget notes. So your budget notes come in, and any notes that you pop in here. So when you're doing your budgeting on your bi-monthly or your quarterly basis, and you notice that you've had a variation, or you know that something's changed, you've got an increase in your insurance, you've got a new project, you've got a new starter, anything that you know is going to have an effect on your budget. If you're making those notes on that monthly, bi-monthly or quarterly, you've got the ability to pop them in there, and then you can view the report. So it's just quite nice. We've all just had the auditors in, so we know we have to have those explanation of variances. We'll certainly be using them again as we come to that sort of precept allocation come September, October time as well. So again, it just gives you those notes at your budget line level, at your cost code level, and tells you those notes of what's actually been happening, what's been happening through the year with your budget. You've got the ability to see the current year budget, so you know what's happened, and last year's will display on there as well. So we can obviously think about this and running this report certainly in 25-26. If that's what we're projecting for our budget, then we've got those notes as well that help us to really pop that together. Similarly, within the reserves module, you've got that reserves notes reports as well. So if you've had any specific differences with your projects, if you brought new projects in, if you've changed your reserves, the management of your reserves throughout the year, you've got the ability to pop those notes into it as well. So whilst they only seem like a very small notes report, they can really be useful and helpful for you when you're looking at the overall structure of your budgeting and what you've got within the system. So that's your summary reports, budgeting module and reserves.